Hi, I'm Melissa. He hit me, hard enough to leave a mark beneath my eye. My parents saw it. They looked right at me, and then turned away. Colton laughed from the armchair, all too proud of himself, and muttered, "Polite little family you've got." That night, I didn't scream. I didn't run. I sat there, silent, small, bruised. But I lit a candle. 30 minutes later, when the lock clicked again, I wasn't the one who stayed down. Before we dive in, let me ask you something. Have you ever stayed silent to keep the peace, only to realize it cost you everything? Drop a comment below. What time is it where you are? And tell me, would you have stood up too?
Bam.
The moment I heard the knock, my body stiffened. Not from fear, from habit. I was still seated on the couch, a damp towel pressed beneath my eye. The skin there felt hot and raw, throbbing like it had a pulse of its own. But I hadn't cried, not once. Crying, for me, only ever made the pain echo louder in my chest. Silence at least wrapped it up tight, contained it. The door creaked open before I could move. My parents let themselves in, like they always did. No call, no warning, just the sound of grocery bags rustling and the scent of that same detergent they'd used since I was a kid. That clean, familiar smell suddenly felt foreign in my living room. I turned just slightly to face them. That was all it took. My mother froze mid-step. The plastic bag in her hand began to tremble. My father's eyes narrowed, not with concern, but with calculation. He was measuring something. But I didn't know if it was me or the bruise stretching across my cheekbone. No one said a word. Behind me, the television kept humming. Some rerun sitcom with that fake canned laughter that suddenly felt violently out of place. Then, just like clockwork, Colton walked out from the hallway. Shirtless, beer half empty in hand. He leaned against the doorframe, looked right at them, and smirked. Well, would you look at that? The polite little family's back. He didn't even bother pretending. Didn't hide the smugness in his voice or the fact that he was holding all the control. My father gave a stiff nod. My mother looked away. They walked into the kitchen and set the groceries down like they were preparing for a catalog photo shoot, methodical, distant. And then they left. No confrontation, no, "Are you okay?" Just silence. The door closed with a soft click, more like an exhale than a goodbye. The clock ticked louder after that. Or maybe it just felt that way. Behind me, Colton belched and dropped into the recliner, like a man who owned the air he breathed. The chair creaked beneath him. I didn't turn. I didn't flinch. I knew exactly what I'd see. His chest rising and falling, eyes heavy, the same cruel satisfaction curling at the corners of his mouth like he'd just won something. I touched the bruise again, not to soothe it this time, to remember. Because the truth is, this didn't start today. It never starts in a day. Yeah. 2 hours earlier, I finally said it, out loud. "Stop treating me like I'm something you bought off the clearance rack," I snapped. Colton was halfway through a beer in the kitchen. He didn't even blink, just looked at me like I was background noise. "You done?" he asked flatly. "I'm serious." That was all it took. The slap came faster than my mind could register. My ear rang. I stumbled back and hit the counter's edge hard. The air punched out of my lungs. I blinked up at him and he apologized. Hand out, voice suddenly soft. "Babe, come on, you always push. You always gotta make it a thing." I don't remember nodding, but I know I didn't argue. Back in the living room, the recliner hissed as he shifted, already drifting into a nap like it was just another Tuesday. The beer bottle rested on his chest, balanced there like it belonged. The room reeked of cheap hops and some cologne he thought still worked. I stood up quietly, walked into the bathroom, and wiped the blood off my lip with toilet paper. I didn't even flinch when the paper came back red. I stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. The woman looking back wasn't broken. She was tired, but she existed. I don't matter to them. I don't matter to him, but I exist. My voice didn't tremble. I picked up my phone and opened a message thread labeled only with one letter. I typed, "I'm ready," then deleted it, then typed it again, and sent. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't need one. By the time I stepped back into the living room, the sky outside had darkened. A cold breeze slipped through the window frame, stirring the curtains like breath. 30 minutes passed, the kind of 30 minutes where every second gets sharper. Then, click, the front door. Colton stirred, grunted, didn't get up. I did. I walked to the door and opened it. Rachel stood there. No coat, just a thick sweater and jeans, a plain black duffel bag in one hand, a brown folder tucked under her arm. Her face calm, but her eyes, they locked onto mine like we'd rehearsed this moment in a dream. She didn't say hello, didn't smile. She stepped in, looked at me, then the Bruise, then at Colton. I gave the slightest nod. She placed the duffel and folder down gently, like she was setting down truth. I walked into the kitchen, barefoot. The floor creaked. I opened a drawer and pulled out a small black envelope, the kind you save for letters that don't need stamps. Colton muttered something and cracked an eye open. I walked back to the living room and placed the envelope next to his beer. He squinted. "What the hell is that?" he mumbled. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time all day, I didn't look away. "Don't worry," I said softly. "It's not poison." I paused. "But it might kill something else." He blinked, confused, reached lazily for the envelope, but missed. I turned and walked down the hallway. The carpet quieted my steps. Rachel followed, the duffel now on her shoulder. The door clicked closed behind us. I didn't slam it. I didn't need to. The silence did the rest. I didn't even let the bedroom door latch fully. I eased it closed behind me, slow and careful, like I was setting a baby down to sleep. Rachel had already started unpacking the duffel. Her movements were quiet, efficient. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and fear. Not mine, his. It clung to the walls, stale and sour, even though he hadn't stepped foot in this room in weeks. She placed the folder on the bed next to a tight roll of clothes, a new toothbrush still in its wrapper, and a slim black leather notebook. Its edges were worn. Colored tabs peeked out. I caught my reflection in the mirror above the dresser. The swelling had started to shift, bruising down into the curve of my cheekbone, blooming like rot. I touched it with 2 fingers, not to soothe, to remind myself it was real. He did that, and my parents saw it, and walked out. Rachel pulled something from the side of the bag, a recorder, no bigger than a tube of lipstick. "Batteries are fresh," she murmured, handing it to me. Then she gave me the folder. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. Every page inside was a memory I'd tried to forget. Every line was something I'd lived in silence. At the front, a notarized power of attorney, giving me control over our shared accounts. Then, screenshots, proof of Colton siphoning my money into a poker app, stupid cartoon dice and all. Then, incident reports, written by me, never submitted, one from January, one from June, one from just last week, all marked in red ink, Rachel's red ink. She always kept that pen in her purse. And finally, tucked behind everything else, a lease. A tiny apartment, 12 miles south. Her name on the paperwork, my signature on the line. "I paid the first 2 months," Rachel said. "You don't owe me. I need you to know that." I didn't answer. I didn't cry. I just flipped to the last page, then closed the folder and laid it flat on the bed. 2 weeks ago, we'd sat together at the library pretending to look at cookbooks while she whispered, "You don't need this to believe yourself, but the court does. His lawyer will." I'd asked her then, why she was doing this, why she was risking so much. She looked at me like I was missing the obvious. "Because no one else is. Because I believe you. And because I'm not leaving you here to rot while they call it a marriage." Yeah. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, finally allowing myself to believe something I hadn't in years. I mattered to someone. Rachel tapped her phone. "We've got one window. After that, he'll be watching everything, every door, every message, every noise." I nodded. "He's already lost control. He just doesn't know it yet." She reached into a side pocket of the duffel and pulled out an old flip phone. No apps, no tracking, just numbers and calls. "He finds out," she whispered. "He'll flip this house upside down." I took the phone, my fingers curling around it automatically. "Then we move," I said, "before the couch stops snoring." I meant it halfway as a joke. But just like that, right on cue, we heard it. Wood creaking, a soft shuffle, the clink of glass against glass. The recliner had betrayed him. Then came the silence, the kind that pulls taut just before something breaks. Colton was moving. I cracked the bedroom door just enough to hear. The front room was quiet, still, but I could feel the air shift. He'd opened the envelope. I could picture his face now, brows furrowed, lips moving silently as he scanned the red-circled numbers Rachel had highlighted, the withdrawals, the dates, and the sticky note I'd left at the bottom. "You'll want a lawyer, not a beer." Rachel nodded toward the hallway. Time. But before she could say more, we heard it. Heavy steps, fast and uneven, storming toward the bedroom. I didn't wait. I opened the door, stepped into the hall. He was there, fist raised mid-knock, caught like a photograph. He froze. His eyes wide, pupils blown. Lips parted like he was about to bark something, but the words never came. I held up the phone. "That envelope," I said. "That's the beginning, not the end." His face twisted. Then his hand reached for my wrist. Not harsh, but firm. The way you grab something you think still belongs to you. But what I saw in his eyes wasn't control. It was panic. And guilt. Rachel stepped out behind me. Calm, steady, her phone already recording. "Let go of her," she said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "This is already live." He let go. His hand dropped like he'd touched fire. He took a step back, eyes bouncing between us, searching for footing he no longer had. I stepped forward, shoulders squared, voice steady. "Smile, Colton," I said. "You're finally on camera." He didn't blink, didn't move, didn't speak. And that silence, it was louder than the slap. His face twitched, just a flicker, like something short-circuited behind his eyes. Then he barked. "You set me up!" His voice cracked. Rage, disbelief, desperation. A man swatting at smoke, too late to see the fire at his feet. "You dragged your friend into our marriage? You're trying to ruin me." I didn't move, didn't answer. Rachel kept the phone pointed. Her other hand rested on the duffel's strap. Colton circled like a dog. "This is entrapment. You can't record me like this. You brought a witness into our home to bait me." I answered, soft and plain. "I didn't bring a witness. I brought protection." His jaw clenched. "I swear to God, Melis, I'll call the cops myself. Tell them you've lost it, that you're violent, unstable. You broke into my email. You've been spying on me." I tilted my head. "Good." He blinked. "What?" I walked to the coffee table and picked up a manila envelope I'd placed there earlier. I handed it to him like I was handing a check to a server. "I already called them," I said. "You'll want to be ready when they knock." He pulled open the flap and froze. Inside, medical records, photos, statements, a printed restraining order request, stamped for morning filing. The heading, "Emergency Petition, Domestic Safety Concern." He scanned the page. One hand dropped to his side, the other tightened around the paper. He was speechless. And I took one step back, not out of fear, just to give the moment space. I didn't rush the moment. I let him stand there, drowning in his own silence, the weight of truth finally crashing over him like a wave he didn't see coming. 2 months ago, I had started documenting everything. Not because I had some grand escape plan. Not at first. I just got tired of doubting myself. There was that morning I woke up with a bruise behind my ear, no memory of how it got there. So I took a photo, uploaded it to a private cloud folder I'd named Rivertown Books, just in case. Then there was the night I locked myself in the bathroom, shaking, while he pounded on the other side of the door. I wrote down what he yelled, every word. I sent it to Rachel before I could even ask myself why. She replied 2 hours later. "Keep documenting. I believe you." Those 4 words did something to me. They rooted deeper than any slap he ever threw. Later, I convinced a nurse friend to notarize the ER visit where I said I slipped in the garage. She didn't ask questions, just hugged me longer than usual. And then there were the recordings. Quiet, careful ones, like the voicemail from last week, after he'd been drinking. "No one believes you anyway, miss. I'm the one with the job. I'm the one who takes care of things. You're just here. You're nothing." That voice, flat and cruel, was now safety. Annette. Anne. Back in the living room, Colton snapped back into motion. "You know what people are going to think," he spat. "That you're the obsessed one, the unstable one. I'll tell everyone you were tracking me. You're paranoid." I didn't say a word. I opened my phone, found the audio file, and pressed play. His voice spilled into the room like smoke under a door. "You're so stupid it hurts. You think you matter? You're property, a burden I'm stuck with." Rachel didn't move, just held the camera steady, her face unreadable. Colton flinched. His cheeks drained of color. He looked smaller now, like a kid caught stealing, still hoping he could cry his way out of it. The room went still. Only the low hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. And then, faint flickers of red and blue reflected off the blinds. He spun toward the window. "You didn't." He turned back to me. "You actually called them?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I walked slowly toward the front door, my fingers brushing the knob. Paused, breathed in, and said almost gently, "Let's see if you still smirk in a mugshot." The knock wasn't loud, but Colton's voice behind the door shattered. "She's setting me up," he cried. "Don't believe a word. She's got her friend hiding in the kitchen with a camera." By the time the officers stepped into view, flashlights sweeping the hallway, Colton had already retreated toward the stairs. Hands lifted, innocent, practiced. "She ambushed me," he said quickly. "She's unstable. She's been acting strange for weeks. She's trying to ruin my life." I didn't say a thing. I stepped aside and gestured toward the kitchen table. The folders were arranged neatly, tabbed, dated, signed. Rachel handed the USB drive over. It clicked softly into the officer's palm. "You'll want to start with the timeline," I said. One officer, a younger man with a sharp jaw and buzzed haircut, flipped open the first file. The other, a woman maybe in her 50s, glanced between Rachel and me. "You did all this yourself?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes, ma'am." The young officer gave a low whistle. "These are time-stamped?" "And notarized." My voice didn't waver. Colton, still lingering in the shadows, laughed bitterly. "This is crazy. She's staging a whole production." The officer didn't respond. He kept reading. They asked him to sit down. When he hesitated, the younger one quietly reached for his radio and muttered something I didn't catch. But it worked. Colton's shoulders dropped. He sat. By the time the sun crept over the trees behind our house, we were in 2 separate cruisers. I rode with the older officer, Brenly, her name tag read. The leather seat was cold through my jeans. At the station, Rachel and I were separated. She gave me a quiet look as they led her down another hallway. I was ushered into a pale green interview room. No windows, just a table, 2 chairs, and a camera blinking softly in the corner. Officer Brenly returned alone. She closed the door gently behind her. "You know," she said, pulling out a notepad, "it's rare to see someone come in this prepared." I didn't smile. "I didn't prepare to fight," I said. "I prepared to be believed." She studied me. Then we went through the files, line by line. She asked questions I answered without tears. I'd already cried in every room of that house. I didn't have any left for this one. Across the hallway, I could still hear Colton's voice. Loud, aggressive, familiar. When Officer Brenly excused herself, a man in a gray suit stepped into the room across from mine. Colton's attorney. He'd arrived fast, too fast, which meant he'd been on standby. Probably sent by Colton's father, a retired judge in Forsyth County. The tone shifted. When Brenly returned, her questions were different, sharper. Less about what happened, more about why. I hadn't come forward sooner. She tapped the affidavit with her pen. "You didn't go to the police until today. Why now?" I didn't flinch. I reached into the folder and pulled out the last page. I slid it toward her. A signed letter from my therapist, dated 6 months ago. In it, she described my fear, the risk of escalation. She named Colton directly. The last line read, "Client shows reasonable fear for her safety in the marital home. Should incidents escalate, she is encouraged to seek legal protection immediately." Officer Brenly read it. Twice. Still, she asked the question I had been bracing for all along. "You sure this isn't about a divorce? A property dispute? Custody leverage?" For the first time, my hands trembled. I folded them tightly in my lap. I knew what I looked like. Dry-eyed, composed, spine straight. Not broken enough to seem real. "If I waited for it to get worse," I said softly, "someone would say I should have come sooner. And if I come now, they say I'm calculating." I looked her in the eye. So I prepared, because I knew no one would hand me the benefit of the doubt. Officer Brenly didn't say anything for a long time. She just scribbled something in her notebook, her pen moving in short, tense strokes. My mind drifted, not far, just back, 3 months ago, to a soft-lit room in my therapist's office. Outside, it had been freezing. Inside, it smelled like chamomile tea and books. I was curled on her couch, knees tucked under me, my voice barely more than a whisper when I asked, "If I leave, and no one helps, and he kills me anyway, will they say I was crazy for staying?" She'd looked up from her notes then, really looked, and she'd said, "Then don't leave in a way they can forget." That night, I didn't start planning to punish Colton. I started planning to survive. Officer Brenly stood and said she'd be back in a few. I waited, counted the tick-tick-tick of the wall clock. When she returned, her expression had shifted again, a little more formal, a little more guarded. "We're holding him for 24 hours, she said. "After that, it gets more complicated." I nodded, no surprise there. She handed me a clipboard with the initial restraining order forms. I signed without hesitation. No ceremony, no relief. Just another step. Outside, the sky had faded into a grayish blue, like it couldn't decide between morning and morning. The air was sharp, it bit at my skin. Rachel was waiting for me at the bottom of the station steps, her hair pulled back, her eyes heavy but alert. She studied my face for a second before asking, "Did they listen?" I nodded. Then I turned toward the car. That, I whispered to myself, was the easy part. Because the hard part was still ahead, calling my mother. She hung. The drive back to the rental apartment was nearly silent. Not heavy like fear, just full, like even the air was holding its breath. Rachel parked out front. Beige walls, paper-thin windows, the kind of place you don't decorate, you just endure. I unlocked the door. That small click of the lock sliding back felt like the first full breath I'd taken all day. We stepped inside. Rachel helped me carry the last few bags in. We didn't talk much. She'd been beside me since dawn, through the station, through the paperwork, through the nothingness of official systems. Now here we were, two women in someone else's furniture. She unfolded a spare blanket on the couch. "You want me to stay?" I shook my head. "I need to do this one thing alone." She nodded, not like she was hurt, like she understood. Maybe she did. Maybe she knew this wasn't about safety anymore. This was about voice, about saying it out loud. After she left, I stood in the center of the small kitchen, not sure what to do with my hands. They felt heavy, like they were still carrying something, maybe fear, maybe memory. I sat at the tiny plastic dining table, its laminate peeling at the corners, and picked up my phone. I hovered my thumb over one name. Damn Mom. That's how it was saved. Always had been. Not Janie, not Mother, not home. Just Mom. I tapped. It rang. My heart didn't race. Not like when Colton used to yell. Not like when I got caught stealing candy at 8. It just ached. That low, hollow ache that lives in a child who still wants to be seen. She picked up. "Miss." Her voice was calm, not warm, not cold, just measured. "I just wanted you to know," I said. "He's been arrested." Pause. "For what?" I swallowed. "For what he's done to me." Another pause. Long. I kept going. Because I had to. Because I needed to say it to someone who had known me before I ever knew fear. The bruises, the hospital visits, the money he took, the screaming. "I thought maybe you saw something. I thought maybe you'd come back." Her voice came soft. Not trembling, not outraged. Just resigned. "Marriage isn't perfect, miss, but airing your laundry like this, we raised you stronger than that." My fingers curled around the table's edge. That was it. That was her answer. Not a gasp, not "Are you safe?" Not "We're coming." Just a quiet defensive silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel it right away. Not until several seconds later, when the numbness wore off and I realized I'd been carrying the wrong hope. I set the phone down, didn't hang up. Just let it sit there on the table. Her voice still floating through the speaker. Fading, then gone. I opened my journal. The one Rachel had given me months ago. Back when she started noticing the quiet behind my smile. I wrote slowly. Today I buried the last illusion. I don't need her to understand. I just need to stop needing her. I closed the journal. Across the room, the envelope I'd carried to the precinct peeked out of my purse. Full of photos, records, statements. I pulled a fresh folder from the drawer and slid everything inside. Then I labeled it in black marker. Disclosure. By now, the sun had slipped below the buildings, dragging long shadows across the carpet. The kind of light that makes everything feel softer than it is. I made tea, not to drink, just to hold something warm. Sat back on the couch, watching the steam curl into the air. My body still remembered where every bruise had been, but I didn't flinch anymore. That's when the knock came. Not loud, just 2 sharp taps. I stood and opened the door. Rachel. Her face pale, eyes wide, not with fear, but something close to disbelief. "You need to see this," she said. She brushed past me, grabbed the remote, and turned on the small TV above the counter. It was already tuned to the local news. There he was, Colton, in a button-down shirt, sleeves neatly cuffed, not even wrinkled. His lawyer stood off to the side, nodding along as he spoke. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," Colton said into the microphone. "My wife, she's struggling emotionally. It's been a hard time. I just want her to get the help she needs." Rachel turned to me, stunned. "Help?" she repeated. I didn't blink. I just watched.
"Jim."
He smiled for the camera. And in that moment, something inside me stopped shaking. I walked to the table, opened my laptop, sat down. Rachel tilted her head. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I just opened a new document, and I started typing. Not to a cop, not to a judge. To someone who could actually change things. Someone with reach. Someone who, once they saw what I had, couldn't unsee it. When I finished the letter, I didn't reread it more than once. I just knew. Then I hit send. Because that night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream into the void. I didn't run. I sent a letter. And not just to anyone. To Alyssa Carrington. A journalist I'd never met, never spoken to, but someone I'd watched for weeks. I'd first seen her on a news segment late one night, eyes swollen from crying, channel surfing through numbness. She was reporting on a senator's wife who'd exposed his abuse. Elisa didn't flinch on air. She didn't sugarcoat. She named names, read court transcripts, asked why the system failed. And the woman she covered? She lived, not just through the scandal, but through the shame. That segment rewrote state law. That night, I bookmarked Alyssa's name, and now I was typing below it, Dear Elisa, I don't know if you'll believe me, but I'm going to give you every reason to. I attached everything. The screenshots of bank transfers Colton made in my name, the voicemails, the photos, some of the first bruises, long before we were married, the medical report from the night he said I slipped, the text threads where the threats hid between casual hellos, the recordings. I included a timeline, our joint financial statements, my police report from that morning, my full name. And then, at the very end, I wrote one sentence. I stared at it for a long time before hitting send. If I disappear, this is my voice. Publish it anyway. I closed the laptop and leaned back in the chair. Outside, the sky was shifting again, from steel gray to the soft peach of early dawn. Somewhere nearby, I heard a garbage truck rumbling down the street. Life, I realized, didn't stop. Not even for this. But something in me had changed. I hadn't cried the night before, and I wasn't crying now. But my breath came easier, slower, like I'd exhaled something I didn't even know I was holding. I stood and walked to the bathroom, flipped on the light, faced the mirror. The bruise under my eye had started to turn, yellow now, like spoiled fruit. I reached up, gently touched it with my fingertips. You're not my shame anymore, I whispered. It didn't sound powerful, but it sounded true. Shaw. My phone buzzed. An email. From Knelt, Alyssa Carrington. Subject: Restore submission. Body: This will not be buried. I'll call you in an hour. I let myself smile, just a little. I set the coffee down, rinsed my face with cold water. Then I sat back at the laptop and waited. Bon man. I didn't pace, didn't second guess. I just sat. 45 minutes later, the Zoom link arrived. I clicked. Her face filled the screen, sharp eyes, no makeup, sleepless but focused. Miss, she said, thank you for trusting me. I wasn't sure I should, I replied honestly. Good, you shouldn't trust easy, she said, but you trusted smart. She verified every file, every timestamp, every audio clip. She didn't rush, didn't patronize. She just listened. It didn't feel like an interview. It felt like passing the baton in a race I had been running alone for too long. But what came next, I wasn't prepared for. You're not the only one, Alyssa said quietly. I blinked. What? There's another woman. Different state, different name, same man. My stomach dropped. Colton? He used an alias. Different last name, but yes, she sat where you are, said what you're saying, and no one listened. Elisa paused. She didn't have proof then, but now, thanks to you, she does. I sat very still. I wasn't the first. And suddenly this wasn't just my voice. It was ours. We ended the call. She promised the article would publish by Monday. I closed the laptop slowly, hovered my hand above the keyboard before letting the lid shut with a soft click. Just as I stood to stretch, the burner phone buzzed. A text lit up the screen. You've made a mistake. Fix it, or I will. No number, no name. But I didn't need one. I stared at it, didn't flinch. Then I said out loud, to no one, no, I just finally corrected one. I left the phone on the counter. I wasn't going to live in fear of it. Not anymore. Because for the first time in a long time, my voice wasn't alone. And by Sunday, I wasn't hiding. I was preparing. And I wasn't the only one. That morning, I zipped my jacket up tight and walked through the side door of the old community center off Mason Street. It smelled like chalk dust and burnt coffee. AA meetings used the space at night. On the wall, flyers, grief groups, self-defense classes, immigration clinics, court advocacy services. Room 4 was reserved. The folding chair creaked as I sat. Across from me, 2 women looked up. Dana, Alana, both older than me by a few years, both with the kind of faces that wore more than makeup. We didn't greet each other like survivors. We greeted like strategists. That was Elisa's doing. She'd called each of us on Friday. "You're not the only one," she'd said. "There are more, and it's time you met." Dana's voice broke the quiet first. "We're not here to swap war stories, right?" "No," I said. "We're here to change the pattern." She nodded. Her hands rested on a thick folder. The corners were frayed. "Financial manipulation," she said. "He forged my signature, rerouted accounts, left me with the IRS breathing down my neck." Alana added, "He isolated me, no credit in my name. When I pressed charges, the DA said I didn't seem scared enough." First time. Second time, they dropped it to preserve family stability. I leaned forward. "What we have now isn't just stories. It's receipts." Alana slid over a thumb drive. Dana unfolded her spreadsheets. I opened my laptop and pulled up the shared drive Alyssa had created. Encrypted, secure, under a decoy name. We each uploaded our files. Bank statements, hospital records, dismissed reports, photos, audio, emails. Every time the system had looked away, we'd save the moment. That afternoon, we launched something. Just a single landing page. 3 names, 3 testimonies, and 1 line. "We are not asking for justice. We are showing you the proof you refuse to see." Joel. My final upload, an audio clip. Colton's voice, low and mocking. "Even if you scream, no one's listening." I typed the caption. "We heard each other." That was it. No hashtags, just truth. Around 4 p.m., I drove back to the apartment. The wind had picked up slightly, brushing the edges of buildings like it knew something was shifting. I stopped at the corner market, picked up pasta, and 2 frozen lemon bars. I don't even like lemon bars, but they were my mom's favorite. Maybe I just needed to remember that someone, once, used to care. Or maybe I was preparing for the kind of closure courtrooms don't give. Back at the apartment, I plugged in my phone, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. I typed in the name of the news outlet Elisa worked with. There it was, her draft folder. The headline stared at me from the top of the screen, bold and sharp. The hands behind the silence. 3 women, 1 man, and the system that let him roam. It didn't shout, it didn't beg. It simply existed, quiet and steady. And somehow, that felt louder than anything Colton had ever screamed at me. I pressed my palm flat against the tabletop to anchor myself. My other hand moved on its own, reaching to the faint bruise under my eye, nearly gone now. Faded, yes, but still there. Memory doesn't vanish when the swelling does. I whispered, "You're not the shame anymore." And then I made the mistake of checking Instagram. Colton had posted a photo from our wedding day. Me in lace, him in navy, his hand on my back, his smile practiced and proud. The caption read, "No one knew her like I did." I didn't flinch, didn't even blink. He was baiting me, playing to his audience, the ones who only knew his Sunday smile, the women from church, the old friends, his coworkers, my family. He wanted a reaction. So I gave him silence and something better. I pulled up an old photo from my cloud folder. It had never been posted, never been shown. Just a hospital wristband, my name, the date printed in bold, the timestamp 1 year before our wedding, the ER visit after I'd fallen down the stairs. Colton had driven me there himself, told the nurse I was clumsy. I posted the photo without a caption. No story, no filter, just truth. And then I logged out. Around 7:30, I made dinner. Something simple, the kind of food you don't need to taste, just chew. I stood at the counter, watching the steam rise from the pot, fogging the kitchen window. I didn't feel brave. Not exactly. I didn't feel angry either. What I felt was heavier, steadier, like the weight of finally standing up straight after years of hunching just to survive. Before bed, I walked through the apartment slowly, double-checking every lock. Not out of paranoia, just habit. The article was scheduled to go live Monday morning. We had less than 24 hours before the whispers became headlines, before people would have to choose where they stood. Just before midnight, I lit a candle. Not for grief, not for power, but for presence. My therapist once told me that rituals matter when you're reclaiming space. So I sat in the living room, candle flickering in the corner, and whispered, not to God, not to him, but to the girl I used to be. Whatever comes, I'm ready. Panis. The article went live at 7:02 a.m. I didn't have to scroll. It was pinned to the top of every page I opened. By 9 a.m., my phone buzzed, a call from Colton's attorney. I didn't answer. By 9:15, another alert came in, this time from his firm. The subject line read, "A termination review initiated." The body, "Confidentiality lifted. Public statement incoming." I stood barefoot in the kitchen, mug of tea untouched on the counter. The email sat open in front of me. I didn't forward it, didn't post it, didn't scream or celebrate. I just exhaled. The softest sound I'd made all morning, and yet it felt like the loudest. Pain. I went about my day as normally as I could, folded laundry, fed the cat, wiped dust from the windowsill. Every now and then I checked my phone, not obsessively, just enough to feel the current swell beneath me. The article's comment section was flooding. Some praised Elisa's reporting. Some shared their own stories. Some asked how to help. But it was the private messages that stopped me. One was from a woman named Camille, a name I didn't know. She wrote, "I read the article. I was one of his patients. Thank you for not staying quiet." I sat down, not because I felt weak, but because my knees were trembling in a different way. Not from fear, from release. By noon, a new number lit up my screen. A different law office. I hesitated, then answered. "This is Monsieur Mercier." A woman's voice responded, calm, clear. "My name is Taryn Everett. I'm with the Fulton County DA's office. I wanted to inform you, we're reopening your case." My mind blanked. Not because I didn't understand the words, because I couldn't believe they were finally being said. Taryn continued, her tone gentle. "I'm sorry it took this long. There were procedural limitations, but now that certain things have surfaced publicly, especially the audio, those barriers no longer apply." I could have asked a dozen questions. I could have screamed, "Why did it take an article, a stranger with a platform, a parade of proof?" But I didn't. Instead, I said, "Oh, thank you for catching up." She paused, then quietly replied, "I understood that." We scheduled a formal statement for Thursday. After I hung up, I found myself walking into the bedroom. The closet door was slightly open. I pulled it wider and stepped inside. Months ago, this closet was my safe space. I remembered huddling here, phone clutched to my chest, whispering, "I'm recording this just in case." That clip was now embedded at the end of Alyssa's article and logged into the DA's file.
Bullshit.
Then my phone buzzed again. I walked back to the kitchen, unlocked it. It wasn't another message of support. It was Colton. He'd uploaded a video. No music, no edits, just his face. His hair uncombed, eyes red, voice shaking. "They're painting me like a monster," he said. "She's making it sound like I'm some kind of abuser. I loved her. I still do. But this is cruel. She's not the woman you think she is. She's vengeful." I watched it all. Not because I was surprised, but because I could finally see it for what it was. I used to hear that voice and mistake the cracks for remorse. Now I saw it clearly. A man scrambling to put a mask back on after it had already hit the floor. Beneath his video, the comments were a mess. Mixed at first. Then one rose to the top. "And she didn't break the silence. She survived it. That's louder." It was shared 30,000 times in the first hour. I closed the video. Set my phone down. It was still mid-afternoon, and the next alert I got wasn't a like or a message. It was legal. And protective order expanded. Defendant is required to surrender all registered firearms by 10 p.m. tonight. I read the sentence twice. Then again, slowly. The timestamp matched the motion. He'd been served. I leaned back in the chair, watching sunlight stretch across the floor in thin gold lines. My tea was cold. My cat was asleep in a patch of warmth by the window. And for the first time in what felt like years, the air around me felt still. I whispered, more to the walls than myself, "We're not done, but now we're not invisible either." No anger in my voice, just truth. And truth, when it's finally allowed to breathe, doesn't need to shout. That night I lit a candle. Not for grief, not for victory, but for something I had forgotten I deserved. A week later, just as the sun dipped behind the skyline, I stood outside the courthouse again. Same steps, same wide double doors. But this time my knees didn't shake. In my hands was a sealed manila envelope. Not heavy in weight, but it might as well have been made of stone. Inside, my final divorce filing, the updated restraining order, the court's agreement to uphold it until sentencing. But I wasn't there just for paperwork. I was waiting. The breeze tugged at the hem of my coat. Cars passed. Distant honks, radio static, bursts of laughter from a sidewalk cafe. Behind me, the courthouse loomed, lights flickering on, one by one. Then, headlights. A car pulled into the lot. Rachel stepped out first. She didn't wave. She just looked at me like I was already understood. Then Dana. Then Alana. Dana's sleeves were pushed up, her hands calm but worn. Alana carried nothing but a candle, unlit. No one spoke. We didn't need to. We'd said so many words over late-night calls, in quiet side rooms, on courtroom benches with cold coffee in hand. Now we just stood, 4 women on the courthouse steps. We weren't broken. We weren't waiting to be believed. We were the belief. I came here alone once, I murmured. I leave with sisters now. Rachel squeezed my arm. Dana gave a half smile. Alana nodded. The sun kissed the last corner of the sky, orange bleeding into lavender, the kind of dusk that makes shadows stretch long and gentle. I turned, envelope still in hand, and we walked in together. Inside, the corridor was dim. Fluorescent lights buzzed. The clerk at the front desk barely looked up. I stepped forward and handed him the envelope. He glanced at the form. Final filing? Yes. He stamped it, a dull thud echoing more than it should have. No cameras, no reporters, no Colton, just the shuffle of paper sliding into a tray. Anything else? The clerk asked. No, I said, that's all. The walk back outside was quiet, but the air, it felt different now, cooler on my skin, sharper in my lungs, like truth had a texture. Across the street, a couple walked arm in arm. A little boy chased a pigeon across the lawn. Life hadn't stopped. It just hadn't been looking in our direction. Dana reached into her coat and pulled out a thermos. Tea? She offered. Chamomile. I took it. Still warm, still familiar. I remember the first time I called you, Alana said softly. You sounded small. Not weak, just hidden. I replied. Hiding felt safer. There was a long pause. Then Rachel added, but you still picked up the phone. And that landed. That settled. Because that was it, wasn't it? I didn't scream, didn't post a live video, didn't break dishes or set the house on fire. I just picked up the phone, whispered, documented, waited, and then I moved. Yeah. I blinked, and suddenly it all rushed in. The first bruise I covered with makeup. My mother's eyes, how they dropped to the floor instead of meeting mine. Colton's voice after his first apology. You made me do that. The sound of the lock clicking, and no one coming back. And finally, me, alone in the closet, one hand trembling, whispering into my phone. My name is Miss. I'm scared, but I'm done pretending I'm not. That clip had made it into the article, into the DA's file, into the record. Not because it was dramatic, because it was real. Oh no. I exhaled slowly and looked up at the courthouse windows. Maybe someone behind that glass, some clerk, some paralegal, maybe even a judge, was reading my file now. Maybe they'd pause, not out of pity, but because they heard something in my words that couldn't be ignored. A woman who didn't yell, didn't perform, but survived. I'll walk home, I told them. Rachel raised an eyebrow. You sure? I nodded. I need the air. They didn't argue. They just hugged me, one by one. No speeches, no tears. Just presence. Before she let go, Alana pressed the unlit candle into my hand. For your window, she said, in case someone's still out there waiting to believe it gets better. I walked home with the candle tucked inside my coat pocket. The streets were amber under the lamps. Everything glowed like the world had softened its edges. My steps felt lighter, not free, but not chained either. When I got to the apartment, I unlocked the door, slipped off my shoes, didn't turn on every light, didn't double-check every shadow. The space was still small, still borrowed, still beige and too quiet. But it was mine. And the quiet, it wasn't hiding bruises anymore. It was letting me exhale. I stood by the window, the same one I had stared out of the night he didn't come home, and the nights I wished he wouldn't. I lit the candle. Its flame flickered softly against the glass. Not bright, but steady, just enough light to be seen from the street. And then I whispered, not to the room, not to him, not even to Rachel, but maybe to someone like I once was. There are bruises no one sees. There are silences that cut deeper than fists. But there is also something else. The kind of healing that doesn't ask permission. No. I didn't move for a long time. Just stood watching the candle burn. And in its glow, I didn't see what I'd lost. I saw what I'd kept. The next morning I woke up before my alarm. Not startled, not in a panic, just awake. The candle had burned itself out sometime in the night, a soft curl of wax hardened against the windowsill. I brewed coffee, let it go cold again, then reheated it just because. The air felt different, like the dust had finally settled. Around 9:15, my email pinged. It was from Camille, the woman who'd messaged me after reading the article. She wrote, "If you ever speak publicly, I'll stand with you. I've been quiet for too long." I didn't know how to answer that yet, but I starred the message, saved it, because some words are anchors, even when you're not ready to grab onto them yet. By midday, the phone buzzed again. It was from a news producer, then another from a nonprofit group, then a podcast request, an invitation to speak, a domestic violence awareness panel. Suddenly, my inbox was full of microphones, and all I wanted was silence. I turned off notifications, just for an hour. I sat on the floor, cross-legged, cat curled beside me. In the quiet, I realized I hadn't been alone in days. People had been with me every step lately. Rachel, Dana, Alana, officers, lawyers, clerks, commenters. But here now, it was just me. And I needed to check in, to make sure that the girl who used to whisper in closets still knew I was listening.
Maddie.
So I whispered again, like I used to. "You're not forgotten." And I felt her, tired but steady, still with me. Around 2 p.m., a different kind of notification buzzed on my phone, a legal one. Protective order renewed. Surveillance review approved. Digital evidence accepted. 3 dry lines. But together they spelled something louder. They're listening now. I poured another cup of coffee, this time hot. Then I pulled open the burner phone drawer. There it was, the flip phone Rachel had given me. Still charged. Still untouched since that last threat. But I opened it anyway, just to see. One new message. It wasn't from Colton. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "I left too, miss. Just wanted you to know. We're not alone." I closed the phone gently, then slipped it back in the drawer. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I went to the bookstore. Just walked right in. No hoodie pulled low, no sunglasses, no looking over my shoulder. I browsed the shelves like I used to, fingertips grazing spines, head tilted to read the titles. I bought a novel, one I didn't need, just wanted. That alone felt like resistance. When I got back home, a new voicemail was waiting. From my father. Not my mother, just him. He sounded older, not tired, just more aware of his own breath. "Your mom showed me the article," he said. "We didn't know, miss. I mean, we saw some things, but not like that. I don't know if it matters now. Maybe it's too late, but I want you to know, your strength isn't invisible." He paused. "I'm sorry I didn't speak sooner. I was raised to stay out of what didn't look violent enough. I know better now." There was another pause, a softer one. "If you ever want to talk, I'll be here. No pressure, just here." He hung up. I didn't cry, but I didn't delete the message either. Bets. That night, I sat down at my laptop and typed something new. Not for the court, not for Elisa, not even for the women I'd met. It was for the girl I used to be. Bets. Dear me, you weren't crazy. You weren't dramatic. You weren't too much or too broken or too quiet. You were surviving. And now, you're starting to live. I didn't even hit save. I just left the window open. Because healing doesn't always look like finishing something. Sometimes it looks like letting it sit, incomplete, and still be okay. The next morning, I woke to another alert. This one wasn't legal, wasn't news. It was poetic in a way. Colton's video, his apology tour, had been flagged, then removed, then mirrored by an advocacy group with commentary. They had spliced his gaslighting statements next to court documents and audio recordings. No narration, just contrast. It was the internet's version of a fact check, and it spread. By lunchtime, the clip had made it into a university's gender studies curriculum. Someone tweeted a screenshot of their lecture slide. The caption read, "How the system sees him, how the truth sounds." I didn't retweet it. I didn't comment. I just screenshotted it and saved it in a folder labeled Kept. Around 5 p.m., I heard from Camille again. She had started a thread, a quiet one, not viral, not loud. Just a simple string of women sharing moments they thought they imagined. Moments where they said no, but didn't scream it. Moments where the bruises were on the inside. She tagged me at the end. And for Melis, who lit the first candle. I didn't light another that night. I didn't need to. The glow was coming from everywhere now. From laptops, and late-night messages, and headlines, and shared Google Drives, and quiet little tweets, and burner phones that buzzed with solidarity instead of fear. We were still standing, not alone, not silent, and finally, not erased. A few weeks later, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside, a single page. Typed. Neat. Precise. It was a court confirmation. The divorce finalized. The protective order extended indefinitely. The ownership of our shared assets restructured. My name alone, now on the deed of the house we never finished decorating. No ceremony, no congratulations, just a black stamp in the corner that read,
I had executed
I folded the letter once, slid it into a clear sheet protector, and placed it in the closure folder. Then I tucked that folder into the back of my closet. Not hidden. Just done. Later that afternoon, Rachel stopped by. She brought lentil soup in a glass jar and a new toothbrush holder because the one you have is depressing. We didn't talk about Colton. We didn't need to. Instead, she noticed the candle still sitting by the window, the same one Alana had given me. Have you lit it again? She asked. No, I said, not yet. She nodded like she understood something unspoken, then added, Well, it's okay if you do. It's also okay if you don't. That night, I sat by the window again. Same chair, same view. Only this time there was no flickering fear inside me, just a quiet, warm wait. My phone buzzed. This time it was Dana. She sent a photo. The four of us standing on the courthouse steps, backs to the camera, each holding a candle, lit or not. The caption read, And the day we stepped out of silence. I saved it. Put it in a folder labeled Louder. Beso. The next morning, I received an email from Elisa. She was being honored for the article, some journalism award with a name I couldn't pronounce. But she wasn't writing to brag. She wrote, You changed things, miss. You lit the match. I just held up the mirror. At the end, she asked, Are you ready to speak on record? I stared at the blinking cursor in the reply box. Not because I was unsure, but because I realized, for the first time, I wanted to be heard. Not for revenge, not to explain myself, not to prove anything, but to make sure that the next person, the next girl hiding in a closet with a shaking hand and a burner phone, would know she wasn't imagining it. That someone did believe her. That silence doesn't mean surrender. That survival isn't small. I typed, Yes, let's talk, and hit send. The interview was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. The night before, I pulled out the candle again. This time I lit it. Not for pain, not for mourning, but for memory. Because I never wanted to forget what it cost to reach this moment. The Zoom screen glowed. Elisa smiled. Welcome back, she said. I never left, I answered. I was just quiet. She nodded, eyes steady. We'll start when you're ready. And for the first time since that very first recording, back when my voice trembled behind a closet door, I didn't whisper. I didn't blink. I spoke. I told my story, every word of it, and I didn't cry. Because I had already cried. I had screamed in silence. I had healed in pieces. Now I was telling it not as a victim, not even as a survivor, but as a woman who rebuilt her voice from the ground up. Weeks passed, then months. The story circulated, then echoed, then cracked open doors that had been locked for years. Camille spoke. Alana went public. Dana launched a grant program for women rebuilding after legal escape. Rachel joined a nonprofit board. And me? I kept living. Quietly, boldly, without explanation. One night, nearly 6 months later, I stood in front of a small group of young women at a support circle. We didn't call it therapy. We called it return. I wore no makeup. I brought no photos. Just one small notebook. Inside, the very first line I ever dared write down. I don't matter to them. I don't matter to him. But I exist. I read it out loud, then looked up and said, But today I do matter, not because someone said so, but because I say so, and because I exist. Louder now. A hand went up in the back of the room, shaky, brave, and I smiled. Because that's how it starts. Not with a scream, but with a whisper that refuses to stay quiet. That night, back in my apartment, I lit the candle again and placed it on the windowsill, not because I needed it anymore, but because someone else might be walking by. And maybe, just maybe, that small flicker of light would say the thing she's been waiting to hear. And you are not alone.